What's up, guys? I am Gemma Jade, if you did not already know. The reason I decided to cover this story today is because it's actually funny. It's something that's always scared me. I've mentioned it to you guys before when I did my first paranormal story video. It's the Black Eyed Kids. I was with my sister the other day and I had mentioned them, and she had never heard of them. So I told her that I would cover them next. I can't even express to you how much the BEK or Black Eyed Kids or Black Eyed Children phenomenon really freaks me out. Because I have no personal experience with them, thank God, I'm going to read stories that I found on Reddit, the creepiest ones that I found. But first, let's talk about what the BEK are. And we'll start with the first story that brought them kind of into the modern urban legend or paranormal phenomenon entity in the internet age, because I've read stories going as far back as the early 1800s and possibly one from the 1500s. Unfortunately, I can't find it. I started researching this back in like 2015 when I saw Brian Bethel's story on Monsters and Mysteries in America, and it really freaked me out, and I read everything I could find on them on the internet, but I can't find half of it anymore now. So let's talk about what they are. So in almost every story, the Black Eyed Kids are described as between the ages of like 5 or 6 and 17 years old. Usually they're in groups of two. They're hardly ever alone. Normally they're dressed in like old-fashioned clothes, or they'll be dressed in what modern day teenagers and little kids wear, but the clothes will be like really tattered. A lot of people describe them as their speech is just off. It's a little bit robotic. It has no inflection to it. It's creepy. They can look at each other and seem like they're communicating non-verbally, telepathically. They always make some kind of request that, in my opinion, plays on human emotion. Like if they have a younger black-eyed kid with them, that one will sit there looking all sad face and they'll say, please, can my little brother or my little sister come use the bathroom? Or we're lost. We need to call our mom. Another thing that's associated with these kids is that before they even knock on the door, most of the time, the victim or the person that they're going to be knocking for is overwhelmed and overcome with this kind of visceral, animalistic, basic human instinct of fear and dread. Some of them don't even want to answer the door. The children have been known to talk through the door. I've heard that they've asked to use a telegraph before. So let's get started with the one story, the one encounter that almost anyone who's read about the BEKs knows, right? It started in Abilene, Texas, and it happened to Brian Bethel. So this happened on January 16th, 1998 in Abilene, Texas. Brian Bethel went to a Dropbox to pay his internet bill, and on the way he stopped at the Dollar Movie Theater next to his service provider's building because he wanted to use the glow of the marquee to be able to read when he filled out his check to drop in the Dropbox to pay his bill. As he did this, there was a knock on the driver's side window, and when he looked up, he saw two young boys. He placed them between about 10 and 14 years old, and this is how he described them. Quote, boy number one was slightly larger than his tall companion, wearing a pullover hooded shirt with a sort of gray checked pattern in jeans. I couldn't see his shoes. His skin was olive colored and had curly, medium-length brown hair. He exuded an air of quiet confidence. End quote. Boy number two, quote, had pale skin with a trace of freckles. His primary characteristic seemed to be looking around nervously. He was dressed in a similar manner to his companion, but his pullover was a light green color. His hair was a sort of pale orange. They didn't appear to be related, at least not directly. End quote. So that's one thing about the Black-Eyed Kids. They also have pale, kind of plastic-looking skin. So Brian said almost immediately he knew something was wrong because he felt this overwhelming sense of fear and dread. And all the kid did was knock on the window. As soon as he looked up, all he saw was two young teenage boys. Why is he feeling this kind of visceral fear? The boys said to Brian Bethel that they needed his help. They wanted to see the new Mortal Kombat movie, but they had left their money at home, and would he please give them a ride to go and retrieve it? Brian was nervous and hesitant, but the first boy seemed so confident and tried to coax him by saying things like, quote, "Come on, mister, we just want to go to our house, and we're just two little boys," end quote. Quote, "Come on, mister, let us in. We can't get into your car until you do, you know. Just let us in and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go to our mother's house," end quote. So creepy. Brian said that as he was about to start denying the request, his hand was slowly creeping toward the lock on his car door to unlock it and open it for the kids to get in, even though he was very sure and very clear, even at this point, he was not giving them a ride. He was not letting them into his car. He said he found himself unlocking the door without even meaning to do so, and he felt kind of like he was being, quote, "instructed," end quote, by the more confident child that was doing the talking, almost like it was some kind of mind control on him. After catching his hand, going to unlock the door, he kind of pulls it back and he looks up, and that's when he sees the kid's eyes were solid black. No sclera, no iris, no pupil, just solid black. Just as with Brian Bethel's encounter, almost every encounter with the BEK states that once you realize their eyes are black, that's when things start getting really dangerous because they know you saw them. And now they know they're probably not getting in. Brian said the second boy continued to stand there completely silent and looking around nervously, while the first boy actually threatened him and said, quote, "We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun," end quote. According to Bethel, he felt like the boy was implying that they didn't need a gun. He started pulling at the door, the kid did, and demanding to be let in, banging on the screen. Brian had noticed that the last showing of Mortal Kombat was just about to end in about 15 minutes, so he knew this was a lie, even if these kids weren't creepy and didn't have totally full black eyes. He sped away, took off, and he said when he glanced in his rearview mirror, there was nobody in the parking lot. So essentially, they had disappeared into thin air. That story is what got me started on BEK phenomenon. Before we go into theories, obviously, let's talk about just a few of the hundreds or maybe even thousands of stories that I've since found on the internet. The title of this encounter is called Midnight Caller. The woman says it felt like a dream. She woke up to her dog, Lucy, who they'd only had for 3 months and was still a puppy, barking upright on the bed where her husband and her 22-month-old daughter were also sleeping with her. And Lucy was barking at the door like there was some kind of intruder or stranger outside of the bedroom door rummaging around or something. The woman thought that the puppy was just freaking out over some kind of house noise or something because they did only have her for 3 months. She was a puppy. So the woman thought the best thing to do was to open the door and show the dog that nobody was there. She said this is what she did with her 22-month-old, so why not try it with, I guess, a baby or toddler dog as well? But she said as soon as she opened the bedroom door, the puppy hauled butt out right to the front door. And not only did she run as fast as she could to the front door, she started growling and just violently shaking, hair standing up, and just going nuts at the front door. So the woman still thinks at this point that the dog is hearing something that she can't hear, some kind of weird house noise or outside animal or something. So she's kind of frustrated and she's like, ugh, let me just open the door and show the dog that there's no one there. She said the second she reached her hand for the deadbolt, the dog went crazy. She started barking, jumping towards the woman's hand, trying to knock the woman's hand off the deadbolt, apparently. When she touched the metal of the door, like to open it, the dog's temper completely changed. She whimpered like she was afraid, like she was backing down. She no longer had that piss and vinegar in her ready to attack. The dog was now scared when the woman went to turn the handle to open the door. The woman said seeing this happen to her dog made her whole temperament change too, because now she was afraid to open the door. Like, what could be scaring her dog like this? And she just had this innate sense of just fear and dread, and the hairs on her arm were standing up, and she didn't understand why. Why did she have this reaction? Her dog was just acting like a regular puppy, hearing a strange noise. She decided to look through the peephole for some reason. She doesn't know. She said she can't explain why she did it, but she looked through the peephole and she saw two kids standing there outside her door, and this was the middle of the night. The woman then goes on to state that she's 21 years old, and the first girl that she saw standing at the door looked to be about 17 years old, so not much younger than her. And she was slender and pale. Her hair was like honey blonde. She had blunt bangs, and it was really long. Her bangs covered most of her eyes. She wore a popular light wash shade of jeans and a thin looking olive colored pullover hoodie, which a lot of them do wear hoodies. But like I said, the clothes are normally raggedy and they're either super old fashioned or in with the times. There's like no happy medium. So, anyways, this woman. She said the older girl was holding the hand of a smaller girl who looked to be about 3 or 4 years old. The smaller girl had the same style of jeans, but she had an ivory colored button down cardigan. She said this all the smaller one could do, seemed to be doing, was looking at the floor shyly. She wouldn't really look up, but it struck her as odd for some reason. And again, she didn't know why she had this feeling. The little one was holding the same exact doll that her toddler daughter had. She said if not for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear that overtook her, she would have probably invited these kids in for a cup of tea or hot cocoa or something to get them out of the bitter cold, because she said it was really cold at this point, but something about them just really seemed off to her and she couldn't pinpoint what it was. At that point, she hadn't made any noise. She hadn't shushed the dog, and the dog hadn't made any noise since it whimpered and backed down either. So, since before she looked through the peephole, the dog was completely quiet. She hadn't turned on any lights. There was literally nothing to indicate to the kids outside that she was standing there. But then, in a mature, confident, strong, and accentless voice, the older one spoke. She still held her head tilted downward, and the woman still couldn't see her eyes. She said, quote, "We have to use your phone," end quote. The woman stood frozen in fear because she was wondering how the little girl or this girl knew that she was there. Again, she hadn't given any indication that she was standing behind the door. For all these people know that were outside, these kids, it could have just been the dog. Then the girl raises her head to face the woman directly and looks back through the peephole, basically. And then she realized, the woman, why she couldn't see the girl's eyes before. And it was because they were black, extremely black, ink black, soulless black. She said they were otherworldly. And the girl spoke again and said, "Our mother is worried." The woman said she'd always been interested in creepy stories and paranormal entities and horror movies and all that kind of stuff throughout her entire life. So she knew right away what this thing was, what these things outside of her door were. She knew about the black-eyed kids. She said although she knew what they were because she had heard about them, she never believed in them. She was a skeptic. She was an absolute atheist. But she couldn't believe it because she always thought it was some kind of urban legend. She said there was no way she could rationalize it. She was standing with a thin wooden door between her and black-eyed children. She said there was no questioning what was right in front of her. She knew it in like the depths of her being, just like she knew the children were wrong, just like she knew this overwhelming dread and fear she was feeling out of nowhere. She decided not to answer the door. She said she just slowly backed away and she wasn't going to answer the door for anything. She said she was as quiet as she could be, and her dog Lucy was still cowering at her ankles but was also completely silent. And that's when the older girl spoke up again. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." With each step backwards from the door, the woman said the girl's tone changed and began to get more aggressive and dangerous and angry. At first, the girl was polite in the beginning when she first spoke, But the second step back, she became commanding and hostile. We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone? Lucy snarled at the door, and the woman inched backwards. There was something inside of her, she said, seemed to be slowly pulling her back towards the door to open it. Even though she physically and in her mind was backing away, something was trying to compel her to go towards the door. She had to fight it off as though it were instinct to open this door for these kids. She said it wasn't like a physical pulling, but it was like a subconscious need to go back and let these kids into her house. She said finally she backed up all the way, went back to her room. She covered the window. She locked the door. She sat there in the dim light of a nightlight because she didn't want to wake up her toddler and her husband, who were still sleeping and had slept through this whole thing. She heard the girl call back one more time, and then she didn't hear anything. She said she was terrified to go back to sleep that night, and she said she hasn't slept right since. She said that she knew that they couldn't come in without permission, so that was the one thing that kind of helped her keep her sanity. She also said she knows they haven't hurt anyone, which we don't really know that, because I don't believe the stories of the people who say that they have let them in, but we'll get to that later when we talk about theories or letting them in. But according to her, she knew they haven't hurt anyone, but she feared that maybe she'd be the first one. Maybe she'd be the exception to that. Definitely, I don't blame her. She says she has this lingering feeling of sadness and extreme dread every single night because she fears a knock at the door. She no longer feels safe in her own home, but her husband keeps telling her to forget it. He doesn't believe her. And that's the end of the story of Midnight Caller. Let's go for one or two more of these guys. This is fun. This story really creeped me out too, because it totally sounds like just something a regular teenager would do, and it just scares me. I don't even like being in my car alone when Ray or whoever I'm with runs into a store anymore, because this one happened in the middle of the day. It's called You Must Let Me In. It says this happened on March 17th, 2008. This person had their one and only experience with a black-eyed kid. They had never heard of anything having to do with black-eyed kids because they were only 12 years old. The person was sitting outside the hairdressers where their mother was getting her hair done in an old Chevy pickup. And they were just kind of bebopping around, kind of bored, sitting there chilling, waiting for their mom. After about 15 minutes of sitting there, this 12-year-old kid, it doesn't say if it's male or female, saw another kid that looked to be about their age walking, pacing back and forth in front of the pickup truck. Just walking back and forth. Doesn't say if this kid was looking in their direction, but I don't think so, because I think what happened right when they made eye contact. This person says they thought they recognized this kid pacing back and forth in front of their truck as a kid that they'd gone to school with. So they banged on the front windshield to get the kid's attention because, again, they thought it was one of their friends. And that's when the kid that was pacing looked up and looked directly at them. She realized it wasn't anyone that she knew. I'm just going to call her she because it's hard saying there and they. Said at this point she wasn't scared at all. I guess even though the kid looked at her, she didn't see the eyes yet. She said the boy walked over to the passenger side window where she was sitting and just stared into the window. Oh my God, creepy. So she didn't get this overwhelming visceral fear that most people that encounter them get, but I have a feeling that's because she's a kid. And the black-eyed boy that was accosting her at this point was also a kid. So at first, before she saw the eyes, she thought it was just another kid just like her. She said the reason that she thinks this kid was staring the way it was to instill fear in her and show her his eyes, that they were all black, coal black. Again, soulless ink black eyes. She said the boy whispered, "You must let me in." She said she locked the car door and ducked down, like underneath the seat, not caring what she looked like to this kid because she was not taking any chances. She said 5 minutes later, the boy was gone, which lucky her because normally they keep knocking, but I guess this is why he walked off. When her mother got back into the car, she said a boy with some kind of problem with his eyes went into the hairdresser and demanded he hand over her truck keys. She said, of course, she said no. And it ends with, thank God she did. So that's a creepy middle of the day story, right? This one is called No, You Won't Be Calling Anybody. So the writer says this incident took place about 13 years ago from the time this article was published. So I guess that would be about 2005 or 2006. He said he just moved to a new city with his wife. They were small town newlyweds from the Midwest. They moved across the country to one of the biggest cities in the Southwest so he could attend graduate school. They were naive and new to city living, so they habitually answered the door without a second thought. And this is something I talked to my sister about. Like, I told her there's no freaking way I'm answering the door ever. Like, even during the day, like, if I don't know you're coming, you're not getting into my house. And she's the same way. But we were both joking that I was like, Ray, and she was like, her husband are going to just answer the door and be like, oh, sure, come in, without even like getting a good look at the kids because they're Mr. Nice Guys, right? He said the first thing that should have tipped him off was someone was knocking when the sun was just coming up at 6 o'clock in the morning, which he said is kind of peculiar, right? He said the second thing that should have dawned on him was this kid had to reach over a really tall patio gate and unlatch it, open it, then come through the yard and then knock on the door. He said it startled him that he and his wife were getting ready for work. It was doing their like normal routine. He said the minute he opened the door, he was overwhelmed by an inexplicable sense of fear. He said to this day, he still remembers every single detail of the teenager. He said he was average height, average build, knee length black leather coat, short black hair, and he was also wearing sunglasses. This is rare in the stories that I've read for them to be wearing sunglasses. He said not only did the sunglasses at 6 in the morning strike him as odd, but the kid was eating an apple, which for some reason he said was just a little bit weird, walking around at dawn eating an apple with sunglasses on. Okay. He said the kid was really polite, but he asked if he can come inside and warm up. The guy was like, no. He said not only did he close the door, but he slid the security chain in place because he had that overwhelming dread sense that everyone seems to get. He said about a minute later he heard another knock, so he opened the door immediately with the chain still on it and didn't even let the kid ask again. He said he just yelled, no, and slammed the door in the kid's face, which at this point, I probably would have done that too. Then again, I knew what I would know what I'm dealing with. He said before the door could shut, though, the kid just stuck his hand like at it and stopped it from slamming, so it kind of just moved on the hinges. And he said the kid looked directly in his eyes, still wearing the sunglasses, and said, quote, can I at least get some ketchup for my apple? End quote. And the guy replied, F that. And he said he was a little confused, and he told the kid, get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. My wife is calling the police. He said the kid seemed to take a minute to like think that over, to let it sink in what the guy had said to him. And then he lowered his glasses and he said, no, you won't be calling anybody. He said at that moment, he slammed the door, not caring about the kid's hand being there, locked it, made sure the chain was tight, and went to find his wife, who was cowering in the other room, scared crapless, in the bedroom. He said he was all jacked up on adrenaline, and he went to the window by the door and ripped the curtains open to look for this kid, because now he's like pissed off because I guess the fear kind of went away, because obviously the kid left, because he said there was no sign of the kid in sight. The gate was still latched from the inside, but there was a half-eaten apple laying on the floor. This story, the apple part of it, I wasn't sure, like, if that made me disbelieve it a little bit. Like, To me, that sounded too storytelling-ish. I want to read some more Black Eyed Kids stories. I'd like to just read them instead of kind of explaining it in my own way. I don't know which you guys would prefer, but that's it on stories. There are so many more. I think I'm going to do a part 2, maybe around Halloween, and try to make it a bit spookier. I just really wanted my sister to hear about this, and you guys too, because if someone comes knocking in the middle of the night, don't answer that door. Another story I heard about that I'm not going to be reading, but I'm going to be doing from memory because it stuck with me. It's a very short one. A photographer was out in really, really deep woods, like missing 411 type woods, in one of the national parks, and she was all alone and she was taking pictures. And she said in her lens, out of nowhere, she was looking, it was clear, and then she blinked, and when she opened her eyes, there was a little kid with all black eyes staring directly into her lens that said, "We don't like photo takers." Creepy, right? And then there was one more that just demonstrates to me that there really is something wrong, and these kids are, I believe, a part of me believes there's some kind of ancient kind of evil within them. I mean, I have a ton of theories, which I'm about to discuss, but I want to tell this story quickly. So this guy was a soldier on an army base in Fort Hood, Texas. This is another one that takes place during the day, even though, believe me, guys, even though I've told 2 of those stories, most of them, the majority of them, do take place in the middle of the night, and usually when you're alone. So this guy's unloading groceries and putting them kind of on his front stoop from his car so he can like carry them in. He said he had a pit bull puppy that every time he would put his key in the door to open it, in his home door, the puppy would come running to the door to jump on him. So he said that he heard the puppy come running, and then all of a sudden, when he opened the door, he saw the puppy look behind him and kind of Scooby-Doo stop, fall over itself, and yelp, whimper, and run back into his room, which later he found was under his bed. It went under his bed. He said the dog's never been the same, but he turns around to see what the dog saw, and he jumps because he sees this little kid dressed in old-fashioned clothing, like from the 1940s. And the kid looks from him and he sees the black eyes, and before he can even get anything else out, the kid said, he looks at the groceries and then back at him, then to the groceries and back at the guy, and he says, "Is it food time? Can I come in now for food time? Let me in your house, I'm hungry." So that's it on the stories for real this time. And I just want to say, while there are several stories out there, or at least 3 or 4, where people claim to have let them in and they ended up being sick, or I'm not sure I believe those stories. They just sound, I don't know if it's the way they're written. I just don't believe that. I don't know what I believe happens if you let them in, but I don't think it's that you get a nosebleed and possibly cancer. I do believe in the story of the woman who was driving and her kid was in the back seat with the BEK, but this video is already going to be kind of long enough, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm going to have to edit it, so I want to get into theories. The first theory I want to talk about is one that I'm going to read. I'm going to tell you where I got it from because I just found it today. I'd never heard of it before. So here it is. And this is coming from Rare Life Black Eyed Kids online. It's an article about the black eyed children. So it says they've come across this theory of what these kids are from a book called Your Haunted Lives, The Black Eyed Kids. And I'm going to read. According to this legend, the kids may be something called Atkan, spoken of in ancient Iroquois Indian legends. Quote, the Iroquois Indians believed in a dark power called the Atkan that could take over children, and an evil one who would mate with human females to produce black-eyed, chalky-skinned children. These children were killed by the tribe soon after birth and burned to stop them from resurrecting. Children wandering alone in the woods could also be taken over by Atkan and would re-emerge with black eyes and pale skin, acting nervously while repeating themselves over and over. Their goal was to destroy the tribe and infect all of the people with Atkan. End quote. repeating themselves, just like the BEKs. Can we use your phone? Let us in to use your phone. Let us in, let us in. Kind of like my toddler when he wants an extra bag of fruit snacks. So, while I take everything I see on the internet with a grain of salt, you guys know I love paranormal stories and paranormal phenomenon and all of that kinds of stuff. Ghosts, hauntings, BEKs are my favorite. Men in Black, I'm going to do those sometime soon. I want to talk about some theories that I'd come across and a couple that I thought that I had come up with, but then I read them somewhere else. So I guess I'm not that unique or that imaginative for that matter. Sorry, I just vaped. Gotta edit that out. Okay, so I hear sometimes that they believe that the Black Eyed Kids, people believe that the Black Eyed Kids are somehow associated with the Men in Black, but I don't know what the connection is except the word black in the name. And they might be otherworldly beings, but I don't think one has to do with the other. And when we talk about the Men in Black, maybe we'll get a little bit more into this, but I'm just going over some theories that I've heard. Also, what I was thinking was all of these missing children throughout the decades and the centuries that have disappeared without a trace. Could it be possible that maybe that legend I just read or something else is turning these missing kids into black eyed kids and they're not actually disappearing into thin air? I also, what goes along with this is think that the black eyed kids are interdimensional beings, that they're coming from someplace that's other. That's otherworldly, that's from another dimension, that's other. Because obviously they're not from here. I don't believe that they're demons. That's been another thing that's come up. But could these be all these missing kids in the world? I just don't know, guys, but that's a really creepy thought to have, right? Like I just said, I don't believe really that they're demons, even though they say that demons will take on the form of a child to kind of put a person at ease when they come to the person to try to possess and take over the child, but they come as innocent looking as possible, not as these black-eyed, dangerous feeling kids, right? Another theory going around is that the black-eyed kids are the product of alien abductions. You know how their eyes kind of are described just like the alien Grey's eyes are, and that the people that they're visiting, either knowingly or unknowingly, have been abducted by the Greys, by aliens, and these are their children. They're a human alien hybrid, and they're being sent back to their human parent for whatever reason. I don't know, guys. I hope this was creepy enough for you. I know I'm really not good with the creep factor yet. Wait till you guys see me film at my sister's house, though. This one was for my sister Carol, but I hope you all enjoyed it. You'll see me Saturday for either personal story or addiction and recovery, and Sunday for whichever one I didn't cover then. I'm trying to do 3 videos a week. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, my subscriber base is really growing. I owe a huge thank to my friend Keith for that, but also all of you for constantly supporting me. You really liked the personal story, and that came from my heart. That was something that happened to me that I've never forgotten, but it's been a lot easier since I was able to get it off of my chest. So guys, what do you think of the BEK? What do you think they are? And if you think it's contact lenses, then number one, you should know that contact lenses didn't exist in the 1800s or even the 1500s when the earliest recorded story happened. And in the 1990s, they were super expensive for young kids to just run around having. It's not like all of these encounters were on Halloween. Also, they're extremely uncomfortable from what I hear. Let's get some interaction in the comments. Let me know what you think. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any constructive criticism for me or any suggestions on what I can do better next time, if you're a regular subscriber, you know that right now I have webcam issues, which is why I'm using my iPhone and why I don't have a background set up, because of the length instead of the width for my filming. But on things like anything else, really, tell me. I'm open to suggestions. I responded to all the comments I saw today, and I also responded to any emails. To anyone I was emailing with, if you didn't get back to me, please do so. I was really enjoying having conversations with you guys. Have your best day. Be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything. And I'll see you this weekend, Lord willing. Mwah.